Well, what's going on, everybody? This is Dylan with Dylan Talks Tone, and today we are going to talk about Fender American Telecasters. We're going to break down all the different models. What are all the differences? I'm going to show you some things that the Fender website does not tell you, and I'm going to show you some things that I think are a little bit weird. We're also going to talk about how you can mod these things, which ones are more easily moddable, and a couple other little things. Let's get started. This is going to be pretty in-depth. All right, so no small talk today. We're just going to get right into it because this is there's a lot of guitars here. We're going to talk about the original series first. So this is like the most expensive series of American guitars outside of the custom shop. These are purported to be, and I say that carefully, purported to be the most vintage correct of the American series of guitars, but there's a couple of little things in here we want to talk about. Let's first of all talk about the American original 50s. So we're talking about like a 50s spec guitar, right? So ash body, nitro finish, vintage 52 pickups, brass saddles, single line tuners, like properly vintage stuff, okay? But the neck is a little interesting to me. This is a little weird. It has a 9.5-inch fretboard radius, and everything I can tell, it should have 7.25 to be vintage correct. And on the website, it says that these are supposed to be vintage correct. So I don't know why it's a 9.5-inch fretboard radius. However, that being said, for most people, 9.5-inch fretboard radius is a lot nicer to play than a 7.25. So, I mean, let's take our whatever and let's just play the guitar because it's actually pretty nice. It has a U-shaped profile. So that's what this looks like in comparison to a C. We'll get into some other neck profiles later, but it's a little deeper. It's a little flatter on the sides, like up towards the fretboard. That's what the U shape is. The other thing, too, is it has a 1.650 nut width, which is also not actually vintage correct. It's a little bit wider than the 1.625-ish that it had in the 50s. So it's a little weird that they're saying that this is super vintage correct because the neck is a little bit more modern. However, that being said, again, it's a little bit more playable. The one thing I want to mention is it does have a heel adjust truss rod. So they're kind of a pain. You got to unbolt it and check it and then put it back together and then check it. And so it's a little annoying to deal with. However, that part's vintage correct, I guess. Let's move on to the original 60s. So the first thing that jumped out at me is this is a double bound alder body with a nitro finish. So it's not like a normal slab body 60s Tele. It's double bound, which is really cool if you like double bound, but it's double bound. It's got the 64 gray bottom Telecaster pickups in it. Of many of the Fender pickups, these are some of my favorites, and I really do like them. They have the same single line tuners, probably vintage correct for that kind of stuff. They have steel saddles, so you've got the vintage style bridge with the 4 bolts in it, so you could replace this and upgrade it if you wanted to. I don't see any reason why you would. It's pretty good, but it has steel saddles. However, one small difference here is that everything that I can see from mid-60s all the way back to like a 64, for example, they have threaded, the 60s saddles were threaded, and these appear, in the pictures anyway, to be smooth. So that is not vintage correct. So they are smooth instead of threaded. I like the threaded saddles. I think they're very cool. So I'm not really sure why they changed that. Again, 9.5-inch fretboard radius, where I believe it should be a 7.25 in my opinion. Vintage tall frets. Again, heel adjust, a little bit of an annoying thing. Cool part is 60s C profile on this neck. I really like this. This probably is my favorite of these original series, these original vintage original guitars. I really like these. The 60s one. This is my favorite one, I think, with that 60s C-shaped neck. Now that's going to be what we're more what's kind of more normal. However, it is still going to have that 1.650 little bit wider than vintage nut width. Unless you're like a vintage snob, I think you're gonna like this guitar because it's gonna basically be more playable, just like the last one. Okay, so let's move on to the original series 60s thin line. So this is going to be a ash body. Now this one's got the later, like post CBS buyout F-style tuners. It's got, now the only weird thing about it is even though it's a later one, later 60s, it's got the small peg head, which is sort of weird to me. I would have think that it would have a big peg head, but okay. I know a lot of people don't like the big peg head. Maybe that's why they did it. It's got a medium C instead of a 60s C, which is a little bit different. Most people are not going to feel that very much. It's just an overall good playing guitar, and it also still does have that 9.5-inch radius and the 1.650 nut width. Again, just a touch wider. This is a pretty cool guitar too if you're into this sort of thing. It's a little more nichey than the other 60s guitar. Now, let's move on to the original 70s. Alder body. This has the 70s Tele pickups in it, and it also has the Tim Shaw Cunif magnet pickups. So, original reissue. Now, these are not like the Mexico ones. These are proper Cunif magnet designed by Tim Shaw. Wide range humbuckers. They are the bigger size, so if you're going to change them out, which again, I don't know why you would, but they are that bigger size, so you got to keep that in mind. We move now to a bullet truss rod on this guitar, so a little bit more modern, medium C. And again, small peg head on a 70s guitar, which is really weird to me. I guess they're just going with whatever's popular on this deal. Very interesting. So, original series guitars, they're staying pretty close to what is vintage correct. However, a couple of those little differences, that neck being the biggest one with a 9.5-inch fretboard radius is a little weird to me. Okay, so let's swing all the way the other direction and be super modern and go to the American Ultra Telecaster. Now this is going to be kind of completely the exact opposite of the American original as far as modern appointments go. Now we did a specific video on the American Ultra Luxe series that just came out. We'll put a gray thing, one of those little boxes, to that video that dives into that series specifically with the Floyd Rose Tele and the Floyd Rose Strat and all that stuff. So you can dig specifically into that series. But the American Ultra has been around for a little bit. Let's talk about some of the interesting things here and stuff we need to know, especially if we're going to mod this guitar or do any kind of upgrades to it. It's got an alder body. It looks like it's top bound, which is pretty cool, and it's fully contoured. So you've got the neck contour, you got the back contour, you know, it's all kind of curvy and comfortable, which is pretty cool. It's got the ultra noiseless vintage pickups in it. So these are noiseless pickups. It's got a series S1 switch. So you push the S1 switch in the little button down there, and that hooks up your pickups in series, so it makes it feel like a kind of a big humbucker. It does the same thing that a 4-way switch mod would do, only with an S1 switch. A couple of cool things about the hardware on this guitar. It's got locking tuners, which is really cool. I have these same locking tuners on my Fender Strat, and I really do like them. They're a little heavy, but I really do like them. One thing to note here is it has the modern bridge. So, you know, a vintage bridge has the 4 screws. The spacing of the pickup and everything is a little bit different on the vintage bridge versus the modern one. And modern bridges are a little bit harder if you want to upgrade them or change saddles out and stuff. You just gotta shop and make sure you get the right thing for them, because that 3-hole bridge versus the 4-hole bridge is a little different. So just keep that in mind if that's something that you're gonna do, if you're gonna mod those or do any changes to that. Now, let's get into this neck. The neck is where the biggest difference, well, obviously this whole guitar is totally different, but it has the modern D-shaped profile. These are nickel frets. You got to upgrade to the Luxe for the stainless. It's 10 to 14 compound radius. Now, we've explained in a couple of videos recently what compound radius means, but basically, you know, the radius of the fretboard is like how much curve it has on the front. And when you look at a compound radius fretboard, it's kind of like a cone. So like it's more round down by here in the cowboy chords, and it's flatter up in the wheedly deedly section, so you can be a lot faster and make more money down there. So, and you have to pay special attention to your setup, nut heights versus saddle heights, to make sure that that is correct. If you want to know more about setting up compound radius fretboard, put it in the comments below and maybe we'll make a video about it. Medium jumbo frets. Now we go to a even wider nut with a 42.8 millimeter nut. It has a compound truss rod, so it's double action. They call it biflex, but it's the double action where when you tighten it, the neck will actually go this way, and you loosen it, and it'll actually go this way instead of just kind of a relaxed tension sort of thing. It'll actually adjust both directions. That's what a biflex truss rod is. And now also we jump up to 22 frets. So we have a 22 fretboard instead of a 21 fretboard. This is a very modern guitar. The tuners are 10 millimeter holes. They're not the vintage style holes anymore. This is a pretty modern guitar. But if you want a quiet guitar, if you want something that you can just grab and play without modding, and you want the thing quiet and you want it comfortable, ultra modern. That's why they call it the Ultra. All right, we're gonna get into an interesting guitar here. The American Professional 2. Now, I love this guitar, and I really like it for what it's gonna do to some Tele people's heads. They're just going to explode when we talk about this guitar. This is a really cool guitar, and it's really well priced at $14.99 right now on the website. I really dig this. First of all, we have to talk about the fact that the body is pine. It's roasted pine, and there's gonna be a lot of people that will argue in forums all day long till the cows come home, or whatever metaphor or whatever analogy you want to put there. But this guitar is awesome. Pine bodies sound great. You don't have to be afraid of them. They're fine. And the roasted thing makes them a little more stable, which is pretty cool. It has a tapered heel. It does not have a tapered back contour, but it does have a tapered heel, which is very, very cool. And we're going to get back to that heel in a minute. I want to talk about something there. It's got the VMod 2 Tele pickups. It's got a push button. So you push it and it pops up, and you push it again and it goes back down for your series. So sort of like the S1 switch, but not the S1 switch. It's got a push up and down button, which is pretty cool. Now we get into brass bullet saddles that are compensated. So you get that 3-barrel saddle, vintage tone, but it's compensated. So for those that think that there's a lot of fight to be had in intonating a vintage style Tele saddle, now you have compensated saddles. It has staggered tuners, which is a couple things interesting about this. It has staggered tuners. They're not locking, and the guitar still has a string tree, which is interesting to me because a lot of times when you do a staggered tuner, you can ditch the string tree, but they still have one on there, which I think is kind of interesting. It has a vintage style bridge, so it'll be easy to upgrade if you want, but man, the way it comes, I don't know that you would even ever really need to. It's pretty cool. Let's talk about the neck. So it's got a satin finished urethane neck. This is probably my favorite finish on any guitar neck ever. This is the way we used to do when we were doing custom builds. This is the way we would do them. I love this. It just feels really nice and really smooth. It doesn't get sticky like Nitro does. I really like it. It's got a deep C, so it'll fill your hand up a little bit more than like a slim C, but it'll still feel, I don't know, it's gonna be an easy guitar to play. 9.5-inch radius again. Narrow, tall frets. So vintagey. It's kind of very similar to the original series, except that it has an extra fret and that it has that 42.8 millimeter wider neck. This is going to be a very comfortable guitar to play. Now, something that the website does not tell you anywhere, I tried to find this and I couldn't find it. Maybe I missed it. If it's on there somewhere, put it in the comments below. But it appears in the pictures that this guitar has a micro tilt, which is very cool. People will argue with me and many people about the use of shims on a guitar, but when you change the neck angle to 1 or 2 degrees on a Telecaster, it can completely change the playability of that guitar and make it really, really nice. And so the micro tilt is a way to do that. And this is very cool. And I think this is one of the only guitars, there's maybe a couple more, that this is on. I think this is very, very cool. It is definitely showing us that this guitar right here is a guitar that is made to be played. It is easy to play. It is good quality components, and it is made to gig. Very, very cool guitar. Okay, and then the other guitar that is in the American Professional 2 series is the deluxe version of this. So this is an interesting one because it's an alder body, it's not a pine body. It does have basically all the same features as the other guitar, but it's got the Fender double tap humbuckers. Now, difference about these double tap humbuckers though is that they are regular size. Now they look like a wide range, but they're actually regular size. So you could swap them out for any pickups that you would ever want if you wanted to do so. Without any problem, because they are actually a regular size humbucker. They do have a push button for the double tap feature, so you can coil split those pickups, and they have the same staggered non-locking tuners. They do have, this guitar does have a micro tilt. It's basically the same thing as the other guitar, but in the kind of 70s deluxe. And you notice this guitar has a big peg head, so I don't understand their rationale for which one gets a big peg head and which one doesn't. It's kind of weird. Okay, now let's talk about the American Performer. This is a $11.99 at the time of making this video guitar that I think is this is a cool guitar. This is a very cool guitar, but there's a couple of key things that we need to know about it as we consider this one. So it's an alder slab body. It doesn't have any contours or anything, nothing weird like that. It's got the Yosemite single coil pickups. It has the grease bucket circuit, so when you turn the tone down, it's not a traditional volume mod. They do a couple things. It's two caps in there, I think. It's a little bit different way to do a volume mod, but it's called the Fender grease bucket circuit. It does have a vintage style bridge with brass saddles, so if there was ever any modding that you would want to do there, that would be easy to do. It doesn't appear that they are compensated though, so if you wanted to swap just the saddles out for compensated ones, you could do that, which is pretty cool. It has this is a new thing they call the classic gear tuners. Now these are interesting. What I think this is an 18:1. It is 18:1 ratio tuner, but I believe it's a modern 10mm tuner hole. They're made to look like Fender or Klusen double line or single line vintage tuners from the 50s or 60s, but to fit in the modern and have a higher ratio to be more accurate for tuning. So they look like vintage tuners, but they're like in modern clothing. So when you flip it over, you can see a little bit difference there. It's not an H style, there's no screws in between them because they're a little fatter, but they look sort of vintage, and then you flip them over and they have the nut on the top like a modern one, so I'm pretty sure that it's a 10mm hole. So if you ever wanted to change those out, you're changing out a modern tuner, not a vintage style tuner, even though they look that way. Okay, so let's talk about the neck. This is a 9.5-inch radius. Again, they really like this. It's also the 42.8 millimeter spacing, which they really like. I feel like that's what Fender's gone to basically for most of the guitars that they're not doing vintage weird stuff to. 22 fretboard again. Do me a favor, get in the comments. I've seen a lot of people in a lot of my videos say it's one too many frets, blah, blah, blah. Why don't you like 22 frets? Because it doesn't really make a difference to anything. So let me know, because it's just like added on the end. It's got a little tab on the end of the fretboard. So it doesn't change anything. Scale length is still the same and stuff. Put in the comments below why you don't like that so much, for those of you that don't. I mean, be nice about it, but let me know why you don't like a 20. This is a weird one to me when I hear that. Just curious. I'm just curious. Synthetic bone nut instead of bone nut. These synthetic bone nuts are really good though. I wouldn't worry about swapping it out. They're pretty good. Modern C, jumbo frets. This is a fantastic guitar. I don't see anything I don't like about this guitar, except those tuners are kind of funny, but they're also easy to change out and do whatever you want with. This guitar, to me, for $11.99, I don't know why you wouldn't buy this. I think it's really, really a good guitar. On top of that, the American Performer also comes in a hum single, which is basically exactly the same guitar, except that it has that double tap humbucker in the neck position, and then it's got a push-pull now. I don't know why they didn't do push-push. Maybe they think it's more expensive, even though it's not. I don't understand. Maybe just to make it perceive that one's better than the other. I'm not really sure. But it has a push-pull to do your double tap function in the neck position for that neck humbucker. Other than that, these two guitars are basically the same. So there you go. There's a little general rundown of the American series of Telecaster pickups. I promised you I would do the video. Man, I had to take like pages of notes because, you know, Fender's website is hard to click around on. If you have any questions about any of this stuff, put it in the comments. If you have real questions, like technical questions and stuff, make sure that you hang out on our Thursday live chat, our Q&A that we do every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. I've been getting a lot of emails and like, how come, or questions in the comments, like how come you're not answering all the questions? Because it's very difficult, and we try to use that Thursday thing for that. So please come over there and join us in part of that. I'm also going to follow this video up probably next week with the Made in Mexico version of this. So we'll talk about the Noventa and the Vintera and the classic player and all that stuff, the player series and all that stuff. So we'll do the Mexico version of this series next. If there's any of these other kind of series that you want to see, make sure you put that in the comments below, because these are pretty fun to make. There's a lot of work, but they're fun to make. And make sure you check out our videos on Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. Yeah, I don't really get any days off anymore. Thanks for hanging out. Make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, share this video with as many folks as you can, and we'll see you next time.